Okay, today we are doing the Chapter 11 recap. As always, this is not going to be anything close to comprehensive, right? We're basically just looking at the major plot beats and important points as they relate to the main storyline. If you do want a more comprehensive summary, Afflatus put one out a while back, so definitely give that a look. But yeah, nothing too in detail, just the mostly important stuff, right? Now, Chapter 11 takes place after the 10th storm in a World War I that is now 2 years overdue. It is 1920, the fighting is still going on, and as a result, the Foundation has found itself at a bit of an impasse. It has splintered into two factions, the Hawks and the Doves, with the Hawks wanting to take a more active approach in regards to the conflict and essentially bolstering the Foundation's own military might with the armies of the world, while the Doves advocate for a more moderate, pacifistic approach, more of a sit back and bide your time sort of deal. Team Timekeeper is there as well. They are currently neutral, but are slowly but surely being pulled into the fray, with Constantine implying that they may soon need to pick a side. We also learned that Arcana's resurrection may have granted her some expanded abilities, which is how the Manus may have been able to throw off the timeline so significantly, even though we've just landed in this era. Additionally, we are finally properly introduced to the red-headed gentleman from Antarctica, Creius, the captain of Squad 12. And that's pretty much it for the Foundation side of things. They will pop in again from time to time to provide some bureaucratic context for why this war matters in the bigger scheme of things, but it's more of an undercurrent of a subplot rather than the main event. It is important, but it is not the main focus. The main focus here is the Western Front, and it's here that we see that progress has long come to a standstill, with neither the Germans nor the French able to take any appreciable ground. Morale is low, people are dying, and we are now introduced to one of our playable characters for this event, Keron. While all this is going on, he is performing his self-assigned duty of retrieving the bodies of the dead and giving them proper burials. The major of the German force, Eberhard Brown, is also shown to be sort of deteriorating in mental quality. His temperament is growing more and more erratic and aggressive, which is something that Keron recognizes as particularly unusual, as they do have sort of a history together. However, before we can fully unravel that thread, Brown sends Keron away from the front lines, tasking him with retrieving a package from the small town of Montpey. And it's there that Keron meets the Foundation nurse Marcia, another key player for this chapter. He asks her for a place to bury his dead while he waits for his package, and she points him in the direction of a hill near the town, which will be a place that we will be seeing quite a bit. We are also introduced to the final primary character of this chapter, the gargoyle and French deserter Sentinel in the woods at the outskirts of the town. But why is she here in enemy territory? Well,
I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business.
No, I was dumber than that.
or something like that. Killing. She's here to kill some fools, right? Sometime later, we see that Pedro has traveled to Montpey himself in an attempt to negotiate a peace treaty with the German side, and just as the colonel that had just rejected him is leaving, he is assassinated, a sniper's bullet sending him to the Great Wiener Schnitzel in the sky. And as you would expect, this causes an immediate uproar, and Marcia, who is on her way back from showing Keron his new graveyard, receives a message informing her of the assassination. She realizes that the culprit may still be nearby and cautiously creeps back to the relative safety of the town. Unfortunately, she is spotted by a group of men in unidentified black uniforms and is pinned down by gunfire. And when it seems like she's hit a dead end and there's no way out, the interlopers are all gunned down by a mysterious third party. Marcia confronts her savior to find that it is, surprise surprise, Sentinel. They talk for a bit, and Sentinel bluntly admits that it was her who had killed the colonel before she disappears in a puff of smoke. Back on the Foundation side of things, Constantine opts to send in Creius' Squad 12 to take control of the situation before it gets any worse, primarily because his presence on the ground would assuage the Hawks' concerns, if only for a time. Back at Montpey, Keron and Marcia are at the hillside graveyard when Sentinel shows up. Marcia crashes out a bit at her for ruining what could have been an end to the war, but Sentinel tells her that it wouldn't have mattered either way. High-ranking positions on both sides have been compromised and are colluding with Manus to extend the war, and that the 1918 peace negotiations that should have ended the conflict were actually sabotaged. Additionally, she tells Keron that Brown is one of the people who have fallen under Manus' influence, and he asks her to spare him, but she essentially just refuses. Back in the town, Kreis has an impromptu meeting with George Kramer, a member of the interfactional committee who has come on behalf of the German parliament to negotiate with the Foundation. Apparently he had heard wind of the Manus interference, and if he can get hard evidence, he may be able to convince the higher-ups to call for a ceasefire. On Keron's end, with his mission accomplished, he now returns to the front only to be informed that more of his brothers-in-arms have been turned into statistics during his absence. The not-so-jolly reunion is short-lived, however, as a call comes in, signaling activity in no man's land. 2 soldiers from the French side have defected and are now seeking to peacefully surrender. The Germans debate for a bit, but eventually choose to accept the defectors, calling for them to approach, only for one of them to be fatally shot. Rudolf, another German soldier, had just freshly ventilated one of the Frenchmen's heads at Eberhard's command. The survivor is understandably distressed and cowers, but this does not dissuade Braun, who is adamant that Rudolf take the shot and finish the job. However, Rudolf, who is just as distressed after taking the life of an unarmed, surrendering man, refuses, which causes Braun to grow incensed, demanding that he fire. And when orders don't work, he then threatens that either Rudolf shoots or he will shoot Rudolf. At this point, Keron steps in to mediate, to no avail. The Manus influence on Braun has clearly overtaken him, and there's really just no way to reason with him. There's a bit of a tense standoff where Braun threatens to now shoot Keron, and when this doesn't faze him, he then proceeds to pistol whip him, which is immediately followed by regret. Keron, whose patience has finally run out, decides that it's time to have Braun relearn the fear of death. He lowers his cowl, forcing Braun to gaze into unspeakable horrors, which leaves the man catatonic and unresponsive. Keron then delegates control of the unit to another soldier, and then returns to Montpellier once again, with Eberhard in tow. Awakening in Montpellier, it seems that Keron's PTSD magic has worked to dispel the Manus influence, and Eberhard returns to his senses, becoming distraught at all of the things that he had done while he was under the influence. Seeking some small modicum of penance, he spills everything he knows about Manus to the Foundation, where it is confirmed that various officials are colluding with the Manus, and as a result, Constantine makes a decision to become more active in negotiating a peace treaty with both sides, using the new information as leverage. On Kreis's end, now given more leeway to act as he sees fit, he begins dispatching his squad to various points on the battlefield in an attempt to ferret out the Manus. He sends 2 soldiers to Hill 299, which will become important later. In Montpellier, Merrill, aka Blackbird, aka Ulrich's guard in Antarctica, is to remain in the event of a Manus attack, and 2 people, Marcia and an officer by the name of Paravian, are sent to a nearby abandoned town. And it's in that town where they are suddenly assaulted by Manus forces. And when it just about seems that they are finished and there's no hope, Sentinel swoops in again to save the day, gunning down all of their enemies. Some of the Manus do manage to flee, but Sentinel swiftly catches up to them, and despite her offer of sparing his life if he surrenders, he instead opts to furnish a new hole in his head with his sidearm. And for the gamers keeping track at home, this is now the 4th time that someone has chosen to self-administer the good old lobotomy in this game, and it isn't even the last one for this event, or even this chapter. In any case, the injuries that Sentinel has sustained in this fight leads to her passing out, and upon waking, finds Marcia tending to her. The 2 come to a bit of an understanding, and even if Sentinel doesn't have any faith in the Foundation's ability to actually, do things, she will put some trust in Marcia, and it's to this end that she leads her to the Gargoyle Sanctuary, a broken down abbey where Sentinel hands over proof of Manus interference in the priest treaties, as well as the fact that they've been supplying information to both sides. Marcia returns to Montpellier with this new evidence. George is convinced that he will be able to negotiate a ceasefire with his superiors, and in the next scene we are shown a radio broadcast of him declaring exactly that. Delegates from the warring nations gather at Montpellier, and Keron returns to the front lines with Merrill in tow to find the soldiers in relatively high spirits, believing the fighting to be finally over. And after briefly catching up, Keron then leaves Merrill there and returns to his graveyard on the hillside to find Eberhard ruminating. They share some talk of the old days and of the future, to which Eberhard mentions that he doesn't really see a path forward for himself, and his actions during the war would haunt him for the rest of his life. And despite Keron's attempts to find him some hope, Eberhard plants the death flag, walks off into the fog, and ends his own life. That is number 5. Back at the Gargoyle Sanctuary, Marcia and Sentinel meet up, and the 2 take a stroll by the windmill where they come across Andreas, Keron's horse who had fled at the start of the war, and they use it to go off on a little joyride. The Yuri fan service is promptly cut off, however, when Marcia is suddenly called back to the front lines. As you may have guessed, the fighting isn't quite over just yet. Montpey comes under attack from the Manus, and the front line erupts into conflict once more as black uniformed soldiers begin firing anew. As it turns out, the soldiers Kratos had sent to Hill 299 are now dead, as the space beneath the hill had actually been excavated and is being used as a stronghold for potentially thousands of Manus soldiers. And while the insurrection at Montpey is quickly quelled by Kratos and crew, the fighting on the front is rapidly escalating. Kratos makes his way to the front lines and meets with Martian Sentinel, laying out a new plan. Although the tunnels beneath Hill 299 are flooded with toxic gas to prevent entry, gargoyles are near immune to poison, so he asks Sentinel to head in alone with explosives and blow up the enemy's munition stores and with it the entire hill, a plan which she agrees to. While Sentinel proceeds towards the hill, Kratos runs his plan by the leader of the Hawks, Irenai, who authorizes him to do what he must to secure humanity's future. And this represents the tipping point between the Hawks and the Doves. The imminent cessation of this war has given the Foundation's Hawks an excuse to expand on the Foundation's military might in hopes of creating a force that can cross the storm and contend with Manus. But back with Sentinel now arriving at the entrance to the hill, she comes across Keron, who explains that he was drawn to this place due to all of the death that is lingering around and the death that is soon to come. He knows why she is here, and though he wishes to stop her, he knows that he cannot, instead leaving her with a warning that although the war she had fought truly is over, she is now entering hell and must contend with her own inner demons. Now, I mentioned earlier that gargoyles are near immune to poisons, and that near is very important because while Sentinel doesn't immediately drop dead the moment she steps into the tunnel, she is accosted by hallucinations. She comes across visions of the soldiers that she has killed, visions of the battlefield, and ultimately her inner demon, the devil that hides within her bloodline. After struggling with her internal conflict, she accepts that she is damned, that her actions are necessary, and that blowing up this hill and the thousands of Manus within it is something that needs to happen in order for this war to finally end. So she does, right? She blows the hill sky high, and with it any chance of her ever seeing heaven, at least in her eyes. And with that, the war ends. Sentinel is eventually pardoned for her desertion, and though her father comes to take her home, she eventually refuses, stating that she will not return until the true conflict comes to an end. Meryl, who had gone MIA the moment the fighting started up again, opts to leave her place in Squad 12, instead choosing to follow Keron around like some kind of stupid puppy because it's supposedly safer, right? She wants to follow a dead man who is attracted to war and death like a moth to flame because she thinks it is the safer option, which is just astounding, really. On the Foundation side of things, this victory certainly seems to have brought the Hawks greater leverage in expanding the Foundation's forces, and we are left with the cliffhanger courtesy of a message from Lilia. It would seem that the next section of the story will be taking place on the Eastern Front. And that's Chapter 11. The primary takeaways are that Arcana may have gotten a bit of an upgrade in powers after her resurrection, the Foundation has now found justification to fire up the war machine, will likely be seeing some very familiar faces come the next main story chapter, and that Antarctica was a fluke, and Meryl's competence and judgment are questionable at best. But that's it, that's the video. Thank you to Pompa Aerostar, Chip II, Bones and Apples, and Akito DTD for being members, and a thank you to Chip and Neo Suez for the 10 gifted members each. It really does mean a ton. And for the rest of you, I hope this helped, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you on the next one. Alright, bye bye.